It's a hybrid Lexus SUV that starts at less than $50,000 before on-road costs. It sounds probably too good to be true, but it's not. This is the Lexus LBX. It's a new model for the Japanese luxury brand, and it's a small SUV. And I do have to say, it is quite small. This is destined for city use mostly, and it's also aimed at younger buyers, something that Lexus historically haven't been particularly strong at before. This is a bit of a step change for the brand, and it's an interesting car to have a look at, and that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to run you through the interior, the driving experience, the technology, the safety, and also the value for money. Let's get into it. The 2024 Lexus LBX is priced from $47,550 plus on-road costs for the base front-wheel drive luxury spec. But an up-spec'd sports luxury gets an asking price of $52,990. And top spec is sports luxury but with all-wheel drive, and that has a $56,990, once again plus on-road costs. Standard kit includes 18-inch alloy wheels, a two-tone exterior paint job, 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, and a 9.8-inch infotainment display. New luxe synthetic leather is used for the seats, while only the driver gets electric adjustment. There's also a powered tailgate, rain-sensing wipers, and a 360-degree camera system. Opting for sports luxury gets you an ultra suede and leather accented interior. There's also hands-free parking, an upgraded 13-speaker Mark Levinson sound system, and active noise control. All examples of the Lexus LBX are powered by a hybrid 1.5-litre petrol powertrain, which offers 100 kilowatts of combined power. Lexus doesn't quote combined torque outputs, but there is 120 Newton meters from the engine and 185 Newton meters available from the front electric motor. All-wheel drive models get an additional electric motor at the rear, which offers 4.7 kilowatts and 52 Newton meters. But that also brings a drop in boot space from 402 litres down to 315. Rear suspension changes from a torsion beam in the front-wheel drive setup to double wishbones in all-wheel drive, but the front McPherson struts hang around for all models. Claimed fuel economy for the Lexus LBX is 3.8 litres per 100 Ks, quite a low number. And our initial drive indicated a number of around 4.8 to 5 litres per 100 Ks, which is higher than the claim, but still impressive. Here's the interior of the new Lexus LBX, and well, it's a small car, so you do have to expect not feeling utterly spacious. And on first look, you don't see a lot of storage room either. I'll just run you through this to start with. You do have a center console hiding in here. That's got this sliding and then sort of tilting function, which is interesting. Bit of room for stuff in there. There's also a cup holder that can slide out of the way, or you can pull it out if you don't need it. Another cup holder up front as well, and then a room for your key or something like that. A little bit of storage there. So it's not too bad actually, but they've squeezed a lot of stuff into a relatively small space here, I think. You do have a storage area up the front here. There's a wireless charging pad, but as you can see, this is my phone. It does hang out over the front a little bit. My phone is a little bit big, I suppose, but just worth noting. I think everyone's phones are getting a lot bigger these days. But in terms of fitting bigger stuff, you've got this space underneath here. So a little bit more bulky things, they will squeeze into there, a handbag or something like that. That would work quite well, I think. And you've got some power outlets. So you've got a 12 volt there, there's a USB-C, there's two more USB-Cs up top here. So you are well sorted in terms of power, but also ergonomically, this feels really good. The seats are comfortable. You've got electric adjustment with memory. They are heated, not vented, however, even in top spec. Materials feel really good. And I think one of those things that's really typical with Lexus is the fit and finish of the interior. We've got some nice materials in this top spec model. And just when you start to look at the little details around the place, it looks and feels really good. So that's important. If you expected a really big car and a small body, no, it's not that, but it does feel like a Lexus, I think, just a condensed one. Here's the second row of the LBX, and first things first, let's talk about space. I am a little bit under 6 foot tall. That's my driving position in front there, and as you can see, there isn't a whole lot of leg room left over. I've got to say, I sit relatively close to the wheel. My legs aren't the longest in the world either, so if you're a bit longer in the leg department and you sit a bit further away, you will run into space issues, I think, if you had a big tall person sitting behind a big tall person in this car. It's not terribly spacious. in the second row. Over on the other side though, I have noticed it's a bit better. The dashboard and the glove box seem to be pushed as far forward as possible, so as long as the person up front does move forward, you'll have a bit more space on this other side. But in terms of otherwise comfort, the seat back is relatively vertical. You don't sit back terribly far. Toe room is okay, and headroom, there's enough there as well. It's okay, I think it's a pass. This is a small car at the end of the day, so don't expect a whole lot of space, but I don't think this is really gonna work for 4 up, or definitely not 5 up. I think more someone like an empty nester, young couple, something like that. This will work with occasional people in the back. Now, we don't have air vents in the back here either. We do have USB-C power outlets. There's room for a bottle in the doors, but otherwise, that's about it for the second row of this LBX. Let's have a look at the boot space of this LBX, because it's not really one of the strengths of this car either, just being fairly small in footprint overall. This is the all-wheel drive model we have here. There's 317 litres of space overall, which, well, it's not massive. If you opt for the front-wheel drive model, you lose that rear electric motor and this floor drops down. It gives you 402 litres overall, so a bit more space, a bit more flexibility as well. Underneath here, we've got no spare tyre. There is a goo repair kit there, which once again isn't perfect, but if you're cruising around town most of the time, perhaps it's not much of a big deal. There's a couple of tie down points, and well, that's about it for features in the back here. This will be big enough for some people, but I wouldn't expect to be fitting really big bulky stuff into the boot of this LBX. So a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder engine with hybrid assistance doesn't exactly sound like luxury, and this is a similar powertrain to what you get in something like a Toyota Yaris Cross small SUV. But we do get increased output in this car, so it's not an absolute apples and apples comparison. And I think it's one area where perhaps the LBX does change things a little bit in comparison to what I'm used to, in particular with Lexus vehicles. I'm thinking about silky V6s, nice V8s. They've been doing a lot of hybrid technology recently as well, obviously, but this 3-cylinder engine just can feel a little bit thrashy at times. Mostly it's when you're on the highway, on some hilly roads, trying to overtake and that sort of thing. You can hear the engine working pretty hard to keep momentum going. Performance isn't too bad. It's definitely not a fast car, but I think it's quick enough for the application. But it's around town, I think, where this car will spend most of its time, and that's where it feels, I think, a little bit more refined and more resolved overall. The engine isn't working as hard in these kinds of situations, so it's a bit more refined and not so noisy, but also it can use the hybrid side of the equation there. So you've got electric assistance. That does a lot of the heavy lifting as you take off from the lights, as you're coasting and cruising and all of that sort of thing. And it lets the car feel a little bit more smooth and easygoing. And if you're worried that this LBX might just feel like a Yaris Cross in fancy dress, I mean, it's partly true. They do share a lot of platforms and components. This does feel like a different car to drive. Lexus says it feels every bit a Lexus. Maybe. I think it does feel like a good quality luxury small SUV. There's a nice feeling through the steering. It feels a bit more heavy and solid on the road, I think. There's a lot of tuning that has been put into this car just to make it feel a bit more premium, I suppose, and it does work out in the end result. Dynamically speaking, it's pretty good as well. We've got a torsion beam rear suspension. We've got McPherson struts up front, so it's a little bit different to what you get in a Corolla, for example, with independent rear suspension. But hey, this works out okay overall, I think. It's got good bump absorption. It's fairly controlled in terms of body roll and that sort of thing. Controlled enough. This is not a sporty car, but it does feel good through the steering, I think. And it does tend to rotate and respond through corners with a good satisfying feeling. Now, Lexus tell us that they have done a lot of work to increase the refinement in terms of noise reduction and vibrations and that sort of thing in this LBX. And it's hard to say without doing a back-to-back comparison, but I have noticed a fair amount of road noise in this car at times, especially on some of the coarse chip stuff on some regional highways. But also, the engine can feel a little bit thrashy and noisy when the car is working hard, so it feels a bit less premium in that respect. But once you're cruising around town, like I'm doing right now, I'm in EV mode doing 40 k's an hour. It is quite refined, quiet and smooth. So it's not the last word in refinement, this 3-cylinder hybrid powertrain, but it is a strong player in terms of efficiency. Lexus claimed less than 4 litres per 100 Ks on the combined cycle for this LBX. We haven't been able to match that during this testing, but I'm doing under 5 litres per 100, which is still quite impressive, I think. And that includes a bit of highway driving without economy in mind, but also a bit of cruising through the suburban streets like I'm doing now. So I think it's pretty good. It doesn't match the claim. Few cars do these days, I have to say, but this is a quite efficient small SUV overall. So if you're looking for a small SUV for city and urban commuting duties, this LBX does feel really good overall. It's enjoyable to drive, and I do think it feels like it has a real premium edge over mainstream competitors that makes it worth considering despite the increase in asking price. But if you need something that's going to cover big kilometers on the highway and that sort of thing, perhaps look for something with a little bit more power and torque in reserve in comparison to this powertrain. It'll do it, but it just doesn't feel like it's got a home ground advantage in that regard. I think one element that helps make this LBX feel really good overall is the fact that the driver assistance systems, of which there is a lot of in this car, including a little camera panel here that's watching everything I do, it doesn't get too obtrusive in everyday driving. It's not dinging and donging at you all the time to get back in your lane, watch your speed, put your eyes on the road, all of that sort of thing. It actually doesn't do a whole lot and lets you just get on with the job of driving, which I think is really important. Cruising through little narrow alleyways like I'm doing now, this does feel like it's right at home here. But for the brand's first take on this size of a car, they call it a B segment SUV in the industry. Other people would probably just call it a city SUV. I think they've done a compelling job of taking something that isn't necessarily a luxury segment, but giving it a nice dose of feeling good. Well, I was a little bit skeptical about this LBX before we got behind the wheel, but I've got to say there is a lot to like about this car. On the open road, it can feel a little bit thrashy through that 3-cylinder engine. The second row and the boot, well, it's not a big car, so you haven't got a whole lot of space available there. But the driving experience is mostly quite good. The interior, it's not full of storage, but it does feel nicely made. It does feel, I think, like a Lexus, which is really important for this car. This is a big step change for the brand, but I think it's going to work for a lot of buyers, mostly people who don't need a lot of size and are happy to be cruising around town. This could work really, really well. Now, let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, make sure you give us a thumbs up on this video and make sure you are subscribed to Drive on YouTube. And of course, for the full review, head over to Drive.com.au.